So I want to spend a little bit of time introducing you to what a data science notebook is, why we use them, and what the limitations of this format itself is. Anyone can access their own copy of this tool through the link above, which hopefully Lourdes or Steve or Sarah will share in the chat, but it's available in the agenda and in the email we sent out to you. So anyone can access this. Anyone with a Google account can actually run it for themselves. It is essentially a way of using computer programming code to operate on data that's stored in the cloud. So we've created a copy of EPA data that we store on a server at the Stony Brook University. And this tool uses computer code to access, manipulate, process, display that data. And so it also includes text, right? Because it's not just the number crunching that's important here, but the context that we need to elaborate on throughout any given analysis that we do that's important. So we start by saying a little bit about how to run this notebook or any given notebook. And it really is as simple as you want it to be. Now, you can certainly, if you know how to program and code, you can go lots of different places here. But if you don't, you really just need to press play on each of the cells or sections of code that we'll see in just a second. Now, I'll give you an example of what that looks like. To run this cell of code, which includes a number of different extra sets of code that we bring in to help us out, we simply press play here. And it will execute that, getting us ready to do the rest of the analysis. And we are going to move step by step through this notebook in order to see the results, looking at the relationship between schools and hazardous air pollutants. Now, I've already run, for the purposes of this demo, each cell of code in this notebook, so you won't see me pressing play very often. But that is essentially how you, on your own, would run this for your own selected county and own selected school. So we start very locally. Okay, we ask you to pick a place that you want to focus on and to look more closely at the relationship between public schools and polluting facilities. So here we have a drop-down menu. We're going to look at Colorado. I know we have folks from Adams County engaging with us here today. So we're going to start with Colorado. We would run this next cell here that would give us a list of all the counties in Colorado. We're going to pick Adams County. Now next, we're going to pull in all of the public primary schools in Adams County, Colorado. We're turning to the National Center for Education and Statistics to do that, using some of the data that they've stored with ESRI here. This is essentially a number of different characteristics, demographic data, attribute data, location for basically every public school in the country. It does not include colleges, universities, and it does not include private schools. So we have this big, long chunk of code here. But again, all we would need to do would be to run it by pressing play. And the result we get shows us the boundaries of Adams County, as well as these smaller orange circles, which are each of those public schools. So if we click on them, we get the school name, and we also zoom in to see a little bit more about them. Okay. So the next cell tells us that we are going to actually look at the polluting facilities. So here we turn to the 2022 version of the Toxic Releases Inventory. And we are going to focus on facilities that reported hazardous air pollutants to that inventory in 2022. Now we could go back further, but for the purposes of this analysis right now, we're only looking at 2022 so that we can compare to the school's data, which is from 2022 and 2023, that school year. So we are looking at hazardous air pollutants in particular. There are about 180 so hazardous air pollutants that EPA has defined, and also keeps track of what sorts of health effects they are estimated or known to cause. So here we map Adams County again, and this time we are mapping for the orange circles different hazardous air pollutant releasing facilities. Okay, so we have the Phillips 66 terminal, the Suncor refinery, Veolia up here, a waste management company, so on and so forth. Now, we could visually go back and forth between those two maps to assess which schools are near which facilities, but we can also do that more programmatically, looking at all the schools within 1 mile of a hazardous air polluting facility. We could choose a different boundary, 5 miles, 3 miles, whatever it might be, but conservatively, we'll look at what's within 1 mile. And that's what we do here in this next cell. And because there might be polluting facilities beyond Adams County that might still be within 1 mile of a public school in Adams County, we actually bring those in as well. So if you see here, the larger orange circles are facilities that are within 1 mile of Adams County. So here's a new one, this coil coater. It's not actually in Adams County, but is within 1 mile of it. And we have the smaller orange circles here that show us, well, these are the public schools that fall within that 1 mile boundary of a hazardous air polluting facility. And now we can actually start to describe a little bit about these results. So in the next series of cells, we sort of sum things up. And we do so both for Adams County or whatever county we selected, but also nationwide. So we have a point of reference. So if we were to go back up here, we would count 18 of those small circles. There are 18 public schools near those hazardous air polluting facilities, which represents about 11% of all public schools in Adams County. And that's 10 of those larger orange circles, 10 hazardous air polluting facilities. Nationwide, we have about 9,900 schools that are within 1 mile of a facility releasing hazardous air pollutants in 2022. Similar number, but that's about 10% of all schools are in that case. And about half, one in every other hazardous air pollutant releasing facility is going to have a public school in its 1 mile proximity. Now, of course, we would also probably want to know, what are these hazardous air pollutants that we are seeing being released and circulated so closely to public schools? And that's what we do in this next set of code here. It returns a table for us that ranks in terms of weight the reported releases of hazardous air pollutants. So we see that in Adams County, toluene accounts by weight, and this is pounds, for the largest hazardous air pollutant. And we know from the EPA also that toluene has neurological, ocular, and probably some other respiratory, acute and chronic effects on health. Styrene comes in second, and we could look at those health effects as well, all the way down to chromium. Chromium, I just want to set aside here for a second. There's some interesting things to observe about chromium in terms of health effects there. You won't see much here from the EPA. Part of that has to do with the fact that chromium becomes it speciates, as it circulates in the air, and becomes different forms of chromium that are quite toxic, some of them, that do have, that are carcinogenic. We don't see that here because facilities are only required to report chromium proper. So it's important to acknowledge that it's being released, but we don't necessarily see the health consequences of it downstream in this table. Nationwide, we see styrene on top here, and we're looking at the top 15 in terms of weight. Now, weight is a potentially not very great measure of the effects of any given substance or the importance of it. So we also look at what are the most common, right? Because, you know, a pound of nickel compounds is going to be different than a pound of naphthalene, for instance, let's say. So if we look at the most commonly reported, we see 3 facilities here in Adams County reporting lead compounds released. I think it's a couple, or 1 here, chromium, a couple ethylene glycol. Nationwide, 700 different facilities releasing lead compounds, manganese, over 400, so on and so forth. Now, we want to know a little bit about who attends these public schools, right? So in Adams County, about 5,000 students attend schools within 1 mile of hazardous air polluting facilities. And actually, 5,000 students attend those schools and qualify for free or reduced price lunch, a sort of proxy for income status and poverty as measured by the census, which is about 56% of all students. So, you know, we look at the schools that are within 1 mile of these facilities, 56% of students qualify for free or reduced price lunch, which is slightly more than qualify for free or reduced price lunch in schools outside of that 1 mile radius of hazardous air polluting facilities. Nationwide, we have over 2.5 million students qualifying for free lunch. A similar rate, you know, in terms of 56% of students within that 1 mile buffer are qualifying. Only about 50%, you know, nationwide outside of the proximity of hazardous air pollutant facilities qualify. We also have demographic information from the National Center for Education Statistics that tells us, you know, if we look at Adams County in particular, those schools that are near hazardous air polluting facilities tend to be quite a bit less white and quite a bit more Black or African American, Asian, and a little bit more Hispanic, Latino. Nationwide, similar set of dynamics, quite a bit less white, quite a bit more Black or African American. And then we can actually look at, so that gives us a sense of the social environment, not just the biophysical environment, that air pollutants, hazardous air pollutants are circulating near public schools, right? Where children, of course, spend a lot of time. Of course, it's not just what's going on in Adams County that you might be interested in, but any specific school. So in this final section, we can look up a specific school like Adams City Middle School and learn a little bit more about it. Now, is Adams City Middle School within 1 mile of a hazardous air polluting facility? No, but it is 1.8 miles, which is still very close, right? And indeed, there are actually 11 facilities within 5 miles. And we map that out here. So if we broaden our radius out to 5 miles, then we see a much wider scope of pollutants potentially affecting students at Adams City Middle School, which we can learn a little bit more about here. A very high percentage of students at this school qualifying for free or reduced price lunch. Also disproportionately Hispanic Latino compared to other schools in Adams County, and a lot less white. So that ends this demonstration of the TRI in Schools Notebook.